CI&CD, presented to you by C Prime and CloudBees.
Thank you, Krista. Hi, my name is Joel Brass, and I'm the CTO and Chief Architect here at C Prime. Over the next hour, along with my co-host Neil Hudson, Solutions Architect from CloudBees, we are going to go over the elements of an agile continuous delivery pipeline and show you how you can get there with Jenkins. A little bit more about C Prime. C Prime provides the full array of application lifecycle management solutions. We focus on agile process and software transformations, implementations for agile hardware, and DevOps process and software optimization. Within each of these pillars that make up our ALM services, we offer a wide array of training and coaching, licensing, and more. We partner with the best companies in the space to deliver the best solutions to our clients. Some of our partners include Atlassian, Version 1, CloudBees, Docker, AgileCraft, Sauce Labs, QA Symphony, JFrog, and more. Here's some more about CloudBees. CloudBees is the enterprise Jenkins company. Their goal is to help you deliver better software faster via continuous delivery powered by Jenkins. First, we are going to cover the elements of creating a continuous delivery pipeline, as well as some best practices that should be used in creating the pipeline. Next, we'll dive into the CloudBees Jenkins platform and show you how you can use the Jenkins Pipeline plugin, formerly known as Jenkins Workflow, to achieve continuous delivery and utilize these practices. This is the cockpit of the new Airbus A380. The entire plane is flown with software, from the fly-by-wire side stick controllers to the full-size keyboard that allows the pilot to enter data in his electronic flight bag. Software has really eaten the plane. The first line of the Agile Manifesto states, "Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software." This is where we start on our journey. Continuous delivery and automation are the key ingredients to increasing software quality while delivering shippable code faster. One of the key aspects of continuous delivery and DevOps is the incorporation of monitoring and feedback loops throughout the application lifecycle. The feedback loop includes the business stakeholders so that they can immediately understand the impact of the new application releases. In a fully automated CD pipeline, information is continuously available regarding the state of that pipeline. This is Devon. He and his team are masters of continuous delivery in DevOps, but he wasn't always so efficient. Let's watch him grow and learn his story. The road to continuous delivery starts with Agile and is implemented through continuous integration. Here we have built a simplified model showing the steps in order to get to continuous delivery. Now we're going to take a user poll. What kind of version control system are you using? Subversion, Git, TFS, Perforce, or maybe something else? We'll take a second to tally the results and give you guys a minute to vote. Wow, more than 50% of you guys are using Git, not a surprise. And 11% using something else. So we have 18% Subversion, 57% for Git, 9% TFS, 6% Perforce, and 11% something else. Thanks for offering your responses. 1 second. Sorry about that. So in using source control, oh, switch screens, got it, sorry. So here's our first step, source control. Devon learned to code at a very young age, and he needed a way to share his code with others. Good thing he learned some best practices early on. He learned to use descriptive commit messages and always link his commits to an issue for traceability. Every commit should be linked to an issue like a feature, bug, or task. He makes each one of his commits a logical unit of code or feature that a logical unit that can be deployed easily. He also incorporates others' changes frequently and shares his changes frequently. He also doesn't commit any generated files like binaries or artifacts into his repository. He puts those in an artifact management tool. Now that Devon has some code, he needs to build it into an application he can share in its consumable form. He's now a toddler, he's growing up a little bit. Build automation is considered the first real step in moving toward implementing a culture of continuous delivery and DevOps. Toddler Devon is using tools like Maven, Rake, and Ant to automate repetitive tasks like compiling and publishing artifacts. His build framework is usually tied to the language he is working on because he doesn't know about Jenkins pipeline yet. The next step in Devon's adventure is test automation. It turns out that Devon's software had some bugs in it, so he learned to write unit tests to test his code first. He actually writes his unit tests first and then writes his code. Next, he focuses on the service layer and does some integration testing to test the software that his interacts with. Devon also creates tests for his GUI in the top layer, but finds that these tests are harder to maintain. He decides to focus his efforts at the bottom layer of the pyramid. The more unit tests he has in his code, the less he needs to test as he moves up the pyramid. Devon still needs to test all of the layers of his code, but he focuses his efforts towards the bottom to improve quality. We're going to go ahead and take another poll. How much test coverage do you have in your software? Full coverage, moderate coverage, light coverage, or no coverage? So the results are in. We have 53% with moderate coverage. Looks like everybody's in the middle. And the far ends of full coverage under 10% and no coverage also under 10%. Thanks for your responses. So once we've got our test, the next step is to start continuously integrating our code. This is the practice of always taking the new or changed code and integrating it with the rest of it. We've already talked about maintaining a code repository and automating a build, but the next best practices would be to make sure that your build is self-testing. Include your test with the code. Everyone should commit their codes directly to the baseline, and every commit should be built and tested. You want to keep the build fast, and you also want to build it in a clone of your production environment. You don't want to have any differences between where you're building and where you're actually deploying your code to. You also want to make sure that everybody can see the results of your latest build, either through some sort of dashboard or information radiator. When the build breaks, everybody should stop and work to resolve it. Your continuous integration should occur frequently enough so that no window could occur when a broken build could make it through and arise without developers noticing the error and correcting it immediately. So after continuous integration, we have release automation. Look at Devon now. He goes by Devon. He's got the hipster glasses, the mustache, and the snazzy shirt. He's focused on release automation. Release automation is how he packages and deploys his application code or an update to development and across other environments. He uses release automation tools to cultivate DevOps best practices by providing a combination of environment modeling and workflow management. These practices help deliver software rapidly, reliably, and responsibly, even with a large quantity of releases. A key part of release automation is having consistent artifacts and configurations across environments. Some best practices to follow would be to produce artifacts once and store them in an artifact repository. Promote these artifacts rather than recreating them at each step. You also absolutely want to use a configuration management tool like Chef, Puppet, or Ansible to manage your environments. And when you do this, you can then treat your infrastructure like code and include your playbooks and configuration management modules along with your code repository. Our student Devon has now graduated into a professor. He's grown up and he's now practicing continuous delivery. He has the ability to create a release at any time. And he knows that his software is confirmed to be in a shippable state because it has been tested and vetted. And the stakeholders have instant visibility into the status of the build and what its production readiness is. As well as teams can perform push-button deployments on demand to any environment. So we're going to take our final poll. How many manual steps are there in your deployment? 1, 2 to 3, 3 or more? Or did you lose count? And the results are in, and the majority of you are saying too many to count. Wow. 1, I guess we should have included 0. That'll be in the next quiz. All right, so thanks for the results. We've got 1 step is 13%, 21% for 2 to 3, 30% of 3 or more, 36% of you guys said too many to count. So from here, I'm going to hand it over to Neil, who's going to talk about the CloudBees Jenkins platform and how it can help you achieve this.
Thanks, Joel, and thanks everyone for joining. As Joel mentioned already, my name is Neil Hudson, so I'm a solution architect for CloudBees, and we are the Enterprise Jenkins company. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to follow in line with this webinar and basically provide you with a little bit of an overview in terms of how CloudBees with Jenkins seeks to deliver continuous delivery. And so this slide is a transition point. Essentially says, we've got basically two modes, I think, within a lot of organizations. You've got the group that's kind of handling the legacy software, the more rigid large, sometimes monolithic type of application stack, right? And it's moving things really more in a waterfall methodology from one large stage of completion to the next. And then you've also got those groups within organizations that are on the right side that are, following in more of an agile methodology, and they're moving towards developing microservices, right? So a lot of independent encapsulated services that are discoverable and manageable and moldable and flexible. And then of course, as you move up that, you get into mobile and containers in the cloud space. So with C Prime and CloudBees, I think you get all of those capabilities, and I'll talk about that as we move on through the slides here. So next slide. So one of the things that Jenkins provides is a way really to create basically a pipeline view. And so in a sense, whether you have simple logic or even monolithic logic that you're doing in terms of creating your software, from the build phase all the way out through the deployment, the pipeline is a plugin, is a feature within Jenkins that allows you to essentially encapsulate all of your work into one job. So instead of having several jobs linked together or chaining lots of jobs together, the idea is to really create an entire continuous delivery pipeline within a single job. And then it also allows you to do things like complex logic. It can do things like survive restarts in case your infrastructure goes down for whatever reason. And then also provide a way for humans to kind of interact with that, right? So you can actually have an approval process that says, hey, even though this has been automated up to this point, let's go ahead and put a line in the sand and say, I think this is good to go to production, and continue the pipeline stage. So one more thing, that the workflow for many of you has been a plugin that's been around for about 18 months now. We just recently rebranded that. So if you see the name Jenkins Pipeline, just remember that was otherwise known as the workflow in the past. Next. So continuing with this, the actual features that are within the pipeline plugin, you can do things like dynamically allocate slaves and workspaces, right? So it allows you to have lots of flexible infrastructure as your needs grow and fall, and as you're perhaps using public cloud or maybe even your internal cloud with some kind of chargeback model. You really want to have that flexibility to be able to manage that within one pipeline job. So you can do things like versioning and visualization, and we'll get to more of that here as we move along. Next. So here is a visualization, essentially an abstract view of what a Jenkins pipeline would look like. And I think the key takeaway here is that Joel talked about the automation stages moving from development through to production. A lot of times your organizations want to do things, whether it's what stage of the pipeline they're in, but you want to do things in parallel. So you want to basically try and make the best use of your infrastructure as possible. So you can do things like have multiple tests running all at once, as you see by the light blue slide indication here with the perf test, Selenium test, and Sonar test. So you're just doing a lot of things all at the same time, right? Parallel within this Jenkins pipeline. Next. And this is, in fact, a stage view. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of the bits and bytes here before we get, too much into the abstractness. So this is what the stage view actually looks like for a pipeline job. So you can see here you've got lots of feedback available. You've got the colors for each of the iterations of the job that's run. Obviously, if it's green, it's at that stage is passed. If it's red, you've got some issues. And if you actually were live here, you can actually hover over these little boxes, and you get immediate access to the logs. You could actually retry any of these iterations. You can see there we've also got ways for you to visually see the pauses, where you pause for human interaction, for someone to actually say, yeah, continue with this pipeline. So that, again, this is just the stage view. This is basically representation of the iterations of this job as it's being run. You get all your feedback that you need from here. You can do continuous improvement as this goes along. And so this is again, anything from simple to complex logic can be represented here. The next slide, please. And so essentially Jenkins being the hub of the continuous delivery and DevOps ecosystem, we just wanted to kind of bring it all together here in terms of how the integrations work with Jenkins. You can see as Jenkins becomes the orchestrator for your pipeline, for these stages that progress from code and commit through build and config, scanning methodology to release, and then finally to the deploy stage. We have a lot of integrations that are available, something like 100 different DevOps tools that are out there today. Some of these you'll see that you're probably using today in your organization stack. Some of them you may not. Some of these you may actually be moving towards. But the good news is that these are available in essentially in the pipeline management system. You can install these and start using these. So next slide. So just kind of go backwards here in terms of popularity. Jenkins is really coming on. We can see through generally just normal, in terms of research, you can see that in a recent poll of CI professionals, you see that Jenkins is coming in towards the more relevant, more adoption part of this little sphere down here, and then also the actual number of installations of this CI tool starting to really start to ramp and becoming somewhat, parabolic here, as you can see in this graph towards the right. So we're excited about that. We're excited about the, propelling Jenkins and the popularity onward. So next slide. And so then just a quick slide about what, the CloudBees Jenkins platform really is all about. We start and we embrace the open source Jenkins core, of course, with the open source Jenkins plugins. They're the green representation. And then we, as CloudBees, as an enterprise Jenkins company, we bring a lot more different features available. Really, a lot of those features are around making this, more scalable, more set up for growth, so that as organizations grow, they might want to add more masters, they might want to add more build resources, package that all together, allow you to do some things like monitoring and managing your resources, so you can actually create dashboards and get feedback on how the infrastructure is looking. Create dashboards that allow you to see what your build health looks like, so you can see if your particular group's builds are failing or successful. You might be interested in say you've got a project as a whole, you want to check on that one. As you segregate that, you can keep up to date with how that's working out. We provide tooling around user manageability, so you can plug in RBAC and get single sign-on capabilities as you move around through your Jenkins infrastructure. And then we'll package that all up with our technical support. So we've got different levels of support response, and we've also got different levels of engagement with our support organization. So next. And so just a general overview of the platform. I did talk about how the platform is comprised of components. So we've essentially got a Jenkins Operations Center component, as you see there. The Operations Center is essentially your orchestrator of your masters and your build nodes. Coupled with the fact that you can actually, if you insert your security and your RBAC models and security realms, you can actually inherit those throughout the master infrastructure. So you essentially can set up and inherit those permissions as you see fit and filter those further on down. So as your organization starts growing, I think it's much easier to move, add more masters, add more build nodes. You can actually create pools of build nodes so you can share those around. That provides you the ability to kind of optimize your resources, avoid paying licenses, and avoid paying for VMs or even machine power consumption that you're not using. That would normally just sit there as an idle space. So the platform is there. We also do things like allow you to control what tools and what updates get actually sent out to the masters as your teams evolve, and they actually want dedicated build nodes for a particular master. They might want a certain different kind of plugin or feature that maybe a different team doesn't want. So that flexibility is there available. Next slide. And then finally, I want, as we get towards the end, I wanted to talk a little bit about the analytics piece. I talked earlier about how you can create with Operations Center your dashboarding. So along with the power of the Elk stack with Elasticsearch and Logstash and Kibana for this presentation view that you see here in this slide, this just gives you an idea of what your dashboards could look like. So you could actually plug in your information, filter it down to a particular subset of projects or teams, and eventually arrive at this dashboard that you could let your team leads or managers anybody that's really interested, right, in the health of your applications and how those are being organized and run, the analytics piece is available there for you. So next slide. So, thank you. So the Jenkins Copies Jenkins platform is available today as essentially you can install that, of course, on premise. It's totally available for you to install on your typical data center infrastructure, but it's also available as images that are available on public clouds such as Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. So if you go to those respective marketplaces, you can actually find the Copies Jenkins Operations Center as well as the Jenkins Master, and you can install those through those marketplace procedures, and then you basically can run those in those respective clouds. So we also actually provide CLI support and support around the platform as a service offerings from Pivotal. So Pivotal Cloud Foundry is an option, as well as Red Hat. So Red Hat's also a partner with us with their OpenShift platform as a service, so you can run our tool and integrate with those tools as well. Next. So as we start to accelerate, continuous delivery, one of the things for the more bimodal teams that are looking to do, very fast, nimble development, Docker, as we all know, is essentially creating a bit of a new paradigm shift, such that you can actually now take, of course, not only your application and all of its binaries and dependencies, but you can package that along with the operating system configuration, package that all together, and then track those images. So those Docker images can be tracked. Those can actually be tested on. Those can actually be published for later, resource. And those can, of course, be deployed into production and run your applications, run your web services as you see them. So about 8 months ago now, we actually released the Docker plugins for Jenkins. So those are available to all Jenkins users. Now, I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but essentially the Docker plugins allow you to both control your Docker images, manage those, get triggers in terms of when those events are being triggered from Docker Hub, let's say, or even a private repo, as well as create actually infrastructure, create build nodes on the fly. So if you actually have a pipeline, for example, or a Jenkins job that actually requires infrastructure, upon which to build, and you want that to be flexible, you can actually spin up a Linux container based on Docker, and that image within the Docker container is going to be specified by you within the build definition, and then you can run your build inside of that Docker image, and when you're finished, you can just tear it back down again, and essentially it becomes an ephemeral build network. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we got a few more slides here to talk about that. So next. So here are those 6 plugins. I wanted to highlight these 6 that are released. So essentially, as you can see, as we read from the top to the bottom, the Docker pipeline, that's essentially what we use in terms of creating your pipeline that we talked about earlier, right, with the stage view capability. This will allow you to do things working with containerized applications and create those pipelines, define those as you see that you need to. The build and publish does what it's essentially named. It allows you to build projects that have Docker files and push those tagged images out to a respective Docker Hub repository. We can also do things like provide notification back and also create the traceability. So for those organizations that are heavily audit dependent and want to know where their particular application got pushed, who created that job, who created the build, where it went, you'll be able to trace that image back, find out if you need to make any changes, where that is located. And then also we have the last 2 features here that are provided by these plugins around the actual Docker environment. So you can create standardized build environments to maintain your isolation, to maintain reproducibility, to actually guarantee that when you run the test in that environment, it's the same environment over and over. You don't have to worry about your environments drifting. in the traditional VM sense. And then finally, you can actually create customized build environments as Docker containers, and you actually specify exactly the instruction set for how that container should look with that image. So next. And then as we get to talking about wrapping this together, it's all about the support that you get. CloudBees has a very strong professional services and support organization. We allow you to have as both customers and both people that are a part of our organization. You can leverage the interaction, the support portal that we have. Of course, we have a support ticketing system, and we provide ways for you to search and get answers to your questions around Jenkins. Next. And then finally, the technical support here, right? It always focuses on getting you the right person to help answer the right question. Whether it be contributors to actual plugins, whether it's plugin maintainers themselves. We could do things like work with you, do screen sharing sessions, that type of thing. So, next slide. And I'll pass this back over to you, Joel.
So cPrime is offering 10% off cPrime's DevOps Kickstart as a special offer for webinar attendees, and we'll provide a link at the end if you'd like to take us up on that offer. So we'll send out links after the webinar. To learn more about continuous delivery using CloudBees Jenkins platform, click here in the link. And then you can also see our last webinar recording, Continuous Delivery with Jenkins Pipeline and Docker Explained, here. And we'll send this link out as well. So now we have time for some Q&A, and we're going to reviewing the questions.
And before we get started, we had a lot of questions about, whether the presentation will be shared. We do plan to send out the slides and a recording as well, so you can take it back and share with your teams. So let's dive right in.
So somebody called out CVS might be a part of the other 11%. It's good to know. Is there any way to find out all slave load and configuration? So in Jenkins Ops Center, you can look at the slave load, right, Neil?
Yeah, there's a way to configure a dashboard so that you can, take a look at the actual queue in terms of how many builds are being concurrently run, and get ideas into, how many available build resources that you have available left, and help you optimize those resources so you can make changes as you might need to in terms of your pool of build nodes, your dedicated build nodes, and that type of thing.
The next question is the visual pipeline staging view available in open source Jenkins or specific to CloudBees?
Yes, that's a good question. So the actual Jenkins pipeline stage view is actually we're actually working through the process right now of making that available as an open source plugin.
What is the CloudBees opinion on recent initiative on Spinnaker, where ideas of pipelines is the core of product and everything is built around pipelines?
That's a good question. So I think we'll provide more background after the presentation, but I think I can answer that briefly in saying that, in a sense, Jenkins is got a lot of different, ways in which to create pipelines, to create a process to, One of those that we like to encourage people to use is the pipeline plugin. So, with the pipeline plugins we showed you, you can do a lot of the different things in terms of simple to complex work. It's extremely flexible, definable. In terms of other offerings that make use of Jenkins, we'll follow up here after the webinar.
So the next question is, are dynamic build nodes available? I think the answer to that would be yes with Docker as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially with so there's a couple of different options there in terms of dynamic build nodes. So certainly with Docker, we do provide a way to create a shared cloud, so you can actually utilize your Docker orchestrators out there like Docker Swarm, for example. In order to have a shared cloud, so you can actually have ephemeral build nodes that are spin up and get torn back down again, right, as you need them. We also work with some of our partners and also in order to help create those, one being VMware with traditional virtualization, as well as working with Amazon Web Services. We have a AC2 plugin to allow you to create shared cloud with that as well. As well as there's ways to kind of share those configurations as well. And I can go into more detail, I think, with a couple of links after the webinar.
Okay, and we can include those in the follow-up email. Another question is Jenkins Build Analytics. Is it available as a plugin today for older versions of Jenkins Enterprise?
So that's a good question. So the way analytics is packaged today, it's packaged with the Jenkins, the Cloud-based Jenkins Operations Center. So that would be a Cloud-based feature currently. And in terms of making that available for the Jenkins, there's an awful lot of plugins, right, that allow you to publish results in the different views that you see with the different job types. So there may be some options there, but to answer this, it's essentially for now the Elk stack that's represented, right? The dashboards that you saw are a Cloud-based Jenkins Operations Center feature.
Any case histories on beneficial applications in the engineering and chemical process industries? This question was asked by Mohammed Al-Ghafi. Let's see, I think we can follow up on that on our side. Do you have anything, Neil, in terms of case histories in engineering or chemical processes?
Well, we do have some collateral, and I think I've been asked this question at times, right, whether I go to different conferences. It becomes a matter of those subject matter experts, I think, trying to understand what it is and boiling it down to a use case, because I think eventually it becomes something that you can mention in terms of creating a pipeline as code is something that we're talking a lot about lately, is being able to condense down your abstract ideas or your perhaps your subject matter areas of expertise into actual simplified logic, right? And then once you have that codified in a way, it's possible to create automation around that. So for particular integrations with other toolings or perhaps engineering types of tool stacks, we'd have to get a little bit more information and provide that back.
All right. Howard Anglin asks, any integration with Bluemix? It's IBM's cloud, I believe.
Right. So I think so. The IBM Bluemix, right, is essentially it's a take from the Pivotal Cloud Foundry platform. So as we do provide integrations with the Pivotal Cloud Foundry, we've got quite a lot of material around that I can share as a link. In terms of working with Bluemix, I'd have to defer that one as well.
Bill asks, how well does Jenkins integrate with other analytics tools like Splunk? So,
well, I think that's a good. You want to?
I was just
Yeah,
going
I think that.
Right.
Okay, Joel. So I think essentially, in terms of integrating with Splunk, right? As essentially both tools potentially can be thought of as data warehouses, right? Both Splunk and Elasticsearch. It's possible, right, to as you use your Elasticsearch as in this case potentially an external source, being able to create pathways into Splunk, and certainly there's lots of great use cases around that, and we do have examples of that integration. In terms of working with Splunk, I think we'd have to get a little bit more specific in terms of what this particular question is referring to. Certainly both tools are good at understanding machine type code and understanding parsing logs, that type of thing. We always seek to try and cooperate, right, and collaborate with other tool stacks that are out there. But I'm reluctant to point to any specific integration with Splunk at this time.
And that's also something that the Operations Center takes care of as well, right, with the Logstash or with the Elasticsearch implementation.
Right.
So what is the main difference between Jenkins and Sonatype, asked by Victor? So you'd see these are
the main difference.
They could work together, correct?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. In fact, we have some example Jenkins pipelines that work along with Sonar. So if you have a Sonar server, right, that's is available in your environment, you could make calls from your pipeline jobs out to that, run those those code tests, scans, and then collect those results and make those available. So we've got examples of that. I can make those available. I think Joel, both you and I, our contact information will be made available, so we can talk more about that.
Yep. How do you abstract many jobs into a single line pipeline view? Asked by Stackable. How do you abstract?
So that's a good. Yeah, so essentially we are working on a tooling in order to be able to take your freestyle jobs. As far as I know, you'll be able to take those and essentially run a translator against those and essentially import that logic into a pipeline. So that's something that I know the community has voiced and talked about. So I think we ought to keep an eye on that as that develops.
The next question asked by Abhijit is, how are statistics captured in Jenkins, and is this configurable?
Well, it is configurable in the sense we have a data retention policy that you can have with the platform. Essentially, we're capturing a lot of information on by the minute, if not by the hour. And creating those dashboards there's actually within Jenkins Operations Center, you can actually customize those dashboards. You can make changes. We have some that are essentially a templatized view, right? So you can create some dashboards out of the box. But we also allow you to do some filtering on the raw data that comes in that's ingested through Elasticsearch and make changes there.
Moore asks, where can I find some good Jenkins DSL examples?
That's a good question. So I think if you take a look at the links that we're going to share with the slides, there's a link to the documentation both on the COBI site and the Jenkins-CI site in terms of some DSL. We've actually got, we're actually are contributing ourselves to a site on GitHub where you can actually find actual pipeline DSL examples, and those are essentially headed by what feature you're looking for. Another great way to kind of get working with Jenkins pipeline is actually there's a built-in what we call a snippet generator that allows you to create actual sample steps. So if you're looking to do a certain, let's say you want to check out right from GitHub or Bitbucket, there's a way you actually can create that Groovy DSL syntax within the pipeline definition section. So if you go look for the snippet generator, you can actually start creating pipelines right away, and it's a great little tool for getting going.
So Ramakrishna asks, why are existing plugins could not be directly used in the workflow pipeline job? Rather,
so we actually,
okay.
yeah, so we actually have a page on for the pipeline methodology. There's actually a section that's been authored in terms of compatibility, and so you can actually go to that link and find the compatible features that are being worked on, the ones that are already available today and the ones that are coming down the pipeline. So, as part of the Jenkins community, you can continue to voice support and ask for more integrations to come. It's always we're putting a lot of engineering work behind the Jenkins pipeline plugin, and I think you'll see a lot more evolution as we go along. So a lot of the compatibility will continue to get better and better. And so we'll provide that as a link as well in our package.
Can Jenkins in the public cloud be hooked into a corporate Active Directory for authentication? Was asked by Peggy.
So in terms of the public cloud, we do provide availability with Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure, and I believe you can set up your Active Directory integration in there. It's just a matter of providing, a pathway, via opening up the correct ports, right? So that's available, and checking with your security and networking team to make sure that that's all going to work correctly.
So there were a couple of questions about the pipeline doing promotion. Will promotion process points be visualized as well or supported in the future?
So Blake, could you rephrase that one more time for me, please?
So the build pipeline view does not cover promotion process that well. Will it be supported in the future?
Well, the promotion process within the pipeline view. Yeah, so the promotion capability is something we're actually working on. I know there's the roadmap items. In particular, I can think of a couple that are talking about that promotion capability, because the person asking the question is right. It's basically a best practice, right? It's really a good pattern to have in terms of promoting, right, particular artifacts, particular things that are in good shape. So that is definitely part of the things we're working on.
Lambert asks, what is involved in migrating from Community Jenkins to CloudBees platform?
So that's a good question. So there's, we're happy, of course, to work with any and all prospects that are looking to do, work with us and become a CloudBees customer. In terms of the migration process, it's quite simplistic in terms of you can actually take your existing open source Jenkins instance. Given that it's on a relatively newer release, you can actually take and install the CloudBees license set of plugins, and that will then license that product as a CloudBees instance, and you'll get basically the CloudBees plugins along with that as well, that will then be enacted and enabled for you to use. So there's that pathway. You're also obviously entitled to create a new instance. You can create a new instance in which you can install the CloudBees Jenkins platform from our website, and then license it that way, and perhaps migrate jobs and job configurations from your your old open source Jenkins instances over. So we'd be happy to help you with that.
Rahul asks, how well is Jenkins integrated for mobile CI/CD?
So we do have basically a blog section for our website. And we do have, my colleagues and I have basically worked with enabling mobile development. So both on the iOS and the Android space, we're allowing enabling use cases for that. So in the blog space, you can see examples for that. We can send links for that, as well as we've also got a whole mobile section that we're working with. We do have, as you know, there's just a plethora, right, of stacks in terms of mobile, and I think it's becoming quite interesting as developers that in the Apple iOS space move over to Swift. There's a recent article about how the CI tool it's becoming quite popular happens to be Jenkins. So I think that's always good to see that we can help. The community is taking advantage of that. So that could be part of the package that we send out as well in terms of that collateral.
Dipjot.
So I think Joel will. We're going to need to wrap up here in a few minutes.
Sure.
So if we could just take a few more questions, and then we'll get the rest of the questions. We'll try and answer the ones that we haven't answered later on.
Does Jenkins provide a way to connect Docker volumes to a specific build process? Was asked by Michael O'Rourke.
Okay. So yeah, you could actually, as part of the pipeline definition, you can actually define a Linux container, right? A Docker Linux container, and actually within that, you can actually map your volumes. So it's part of the Docker keyword, the DSL word that's available within pipeline. And you can actually, so you can map the volumes that you're looking for. And then along with the other Docker plugins that I mentioned, such as traceability, you'll be able to essentially track, right, and audit where your data is coming from, get the Docker tags, find out where that's located, and so that should help you with the tracking process.
All right. Well, we'll send some follow-up emails on some of the questions that we did not get a chance to answer. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks, Neil, for co-presenting, and thanks for CloudBees for co-sponsoring with us. And we will be providing emails and links to all attendees after the webinar. Thank you very much, and have a great day.